Yes. There is a substantial body of psychological and trauma research that supports the core argument you're making. One of the biggest misconceptions in child protection, family law, and criminal justice is the assumption that once someone turns 18 they suddenly become psychologically independent, capable of recognizing abuse, reporting it, and separating themselves from the abuser. Developmental psychology, trauma psychology, and attachment research all suggest that this assumption is often unrealistic. The key point: the age of 18 is a legal threshold, not a psychological one. If a child has spent years being abused, intimidated, controlled, manipulated, isolated, or groomed by a parent, the effects of that conditioning do not disappear on their 18th birthday. The young adult enters adulthood carrying all of the psychological adaptations that helped them survive childhood. In many cases, those adaptations actively prevent disclosure. Trauma bonding. One concept that may be particularly relevant is the scientific literature on trauma bonding. A child who depends entirely on an abusive parent for food, shelter, safety, identity, and emotional connection cannot simply reject that parent. The child learns, "This person hurts me. This person is also the person I need to survive. Opposing them is dangerous. Agreeing with them is safer." Over time, the child's nervous system adapts to that reality. The result is that loyalty to the abuser can coexist with fear of the abuser. This is why many abused children defend abusive parents, deny abuse, minimize abuse, blame themselves, attack the protective parent, refuse to cooperate with investigations. These behaviors are often misunderstood as evidence that abuse did not occur, when in reality they can be evidence of prolonged coercive control. Attachment theory. From an attachment perspective, children are biologically driven to maintain attachment to caregivers. Even when caregivers are dangerous, a child cannot psychologically afford to believe, "The person responsible for protecting me is dangerous." That belief threatens the child's entire sense of safety. Instead, children frequently adopt explanations such as, "I deserved it. It wasn't that bad. My mother abandoned me. My father only did it because he loved me." These explanations preserve attachment but distort reality. When this process continues for years, those beliefs can become deeply ingrained. An 18-year-old may still be operating from the same distorted attachment system that was formed at age 8. Learned helplessness. Another important concept is learned helplessness. If children repeatedly experience situations where nobody believes them, nobody rescues them, disclosures make things worse, authority figures fail them, they can learn that resistance is pointless. Eventually they stop trying. Not because they are choosing abuse. Because psychologically they have learned that nothing changes. When people later ask, "Why didn't they leave?" the answer may be, because years of experience taught them that leaving was impossible. Coercive control. Modern psychology increasingly recognizes coercive control as a powerful form of abuse. A controlling parent may spend years shaping what the child believes, who the child trusts, how the child views the other parent, what the child thinks will happen if they disclose abuse. The child may genuinely believe, "The protective parent is dangerous. Social services are dangerous. Police are dangerous. Disclosure will destroy the family. Disclosure will lead to punishment." These beliefs can persist well into adulthood. The person is legally an adult, but psychologically they are still operating within the coercive system. Developmental trauma. Long-term childhood abuse often produces what clinicians refer to as complex trauma or developmental trauma. Common consequences include difficulty trusting people, emotional dysregulation, depression, anxiety, dissociation, memory fragmentation, difficulty identifying abuse, low self-worth, dependence on controlling figures, difficulty making independent decisions. One important point for your argument is that trauma memories are not always stored in a clear, organized narrative form. An abused young adult may know that something is wrong without being able to explain it coherently. People often expect victims to provide a neat chronological account. Trauma frequently does the opposite. It disrupts memory organization and narrative coherence. Why victims may not report abuse at 18. There are many reasons. 1. They still fear the abuser. 2. They are financially dependent. 3. They are emotionally dependent. 4. They have been conditioned not to disclose. 5. They do not fully recognize the behavior as abuse. 6. They fear retaliation. 7. They fear not being believed. 8. They blame themselves. 9. They have been taught that the abuse is normal. 10. They have never experienced a healthy alternative. Therefore, failure to report abuse immediately upon turning 18 is not evidence that abuse did not occur. From a trauma perspective, delayed disclosure is often entirely predictable. An argument for your mock court. You could frame it this way. A child who has spent years under the authority of an abusive and controlling parent does not emerge into adulthood as a psychologically unconditioned individual. They enter adulthood carrying the effects of trauma, attachment disruption, coercive control, fear conditioning, and learned helplessness. The law may recognize them as an adult on their 18th birthday, but psychology does not support the assumption that they suddenly acquire the capacity to identify, articulate, report, and escape the abuse that shaped their entire development. Indeed, the very effects of prolonged abuse are often the factors that prevent immediate disclosure or separation from the perpetrator. An even stronger formulation is, if the abuse was sufficiently serious to damage the child's development, then the consequences of that damage cannot logically be used as evidence that the abuse did not occur. That is often the central psychological point. The behaviors that outsiders find confusing, remaining loyal to the abuser, failing to report, staying in contact, defending the perpetrator, rejecting help, can be understood as foreseeable consequences of prolonged childhood abuse and coercive control, rather than evidence against it.